All right. Well, again, my name is John Brock in the United States, and Paulina asked me to talk to you today about how I use SketchUp and estimating and quantity takeoffs and so forth. A little funny thing last night is I was checking out your website for this event, and it translated into English. And as I was reading, I stumbled on the in the middle there, an interesting sentence. I'm curious as that translation to how that worked. But anyways, I'm still laughing about that. If you can read that. So, yes, I've also written a book called SketchUp for Builders. So I've been a home builder and designer for the last 25, 30 years. And for the last decade, I've been obsessed with 3D modeling and using SketchUp to basically model everything down to the stud. I mean, every single component, every phase of construction. And so I wrote a book last year. It's called SketchUp for Builders, and it goes through my workflow of how I use SketchUp to do all phases. So I also, along the way, I got the attention of SketchUp, and I started speaking for them at trade shows, conventions, and that sort of thing, and got to know a lot of the guys at SketchUp. And I kept asking for a way of getting takeoffs and quantities because there was no plugin for that. And so they just said, well, if you want to do it, you can hire a developer to do it. And so I thought that seemed kind of strange, but they had an open source ability. So I hired a developer and we created Estimator. We're on our second version now. But essentially, Estimator lets me assign, it's taking objects inside of a SketchUp and pairing it up with an item in an items database, which we'll talk about. Or you can just, you don't need to use the items database. You can just take an object in SketchUp and assign a price to it and that sort of thing. So that's where Estimator came out. The other one is Framer for SketchUp. I needed a way, I do a lot of timber framed walls, and I needed a way to model them and also get the quantities. So now we have Framer for SketchUp, and it works with Estimator so that you can get your quantities as you model your framing. Next is Issue Tracker, which is it's kind of like a markup tool for SketchUp. So if you're with a client, they say, okay, I want to change that color or move that door or whatever. Maybe it's with a coworker and you're checking out their model and you want them to change something. You can just drag this little tag over top of the item, fill out the information, and then create a branded report, graphic report with an image and everything showing what the issues are to be fixed. Another thing I created that I needed for a long time was a way to get plans into SketchUp to model. So everybody knows that SketchUp's a great design tool, but it's a really great build tool. So for me as a builder, I'm using it to take a two-dimensional drawing and bring it to life versus using SketchUp to do the design. The design's already been done at that point. So as builders, we typically get PDF drawings of floor plans, elevations, and that sort of thing. So PDF importer, you can import a CAD file into SketchUp Pro, but you will not get the text and everything you see like you're seeing in this image here. And so when you're trying to make a model on top of something like that, it's really helpful to be able to see the text, to know what size door it is or what size window or what a dimension is. So PDF importer will allow you to directly import a vector PDF directly into SketchUp. Okay, so all of these plugins are on my website, which I'll show you in a second. There's a 14-day free trial on the plugins, except for the importer is just a one-day thing. But it's all full versions, offering a 20% discount if anybody's interested in any of the plugins. Just use the word ketchup, all lowercase like you see there, and that would be the discount code at checkout, and you get 20% off each one, or any which one you want. So this is a rendering of a sample model that I give away on the Estimator for SketchUp site. And we basically have everything accounted for and modeled in this one model. And that was rendered using Lumion, but it was modeled inside of SketchUp. So that's, let's just jump into the specifics then. I'll show you on the website, first of all. So this is Estimator for SketchUp. And you can see here there's a 14-day free trial. That's the model that we discussed. And this is where you could download the sample model, and it's fully estimated. And then I show in videos, you know, how it's all done. Basically, I tried to appeal to different sectors. For instance, interior designers don't really care about framing, perhaps. So you could go right to the discussion of interior design and so forth. Builders and architects would like to see more of everything. And then landscape designers would only want to see just perhaps the landscaping. So I've got that done in tutorials here, so that if you can play along at home, if you will, if you download the plugin, you'd be able to download the sample model and then follow along in each of these videos where I'm showing how everything is done. So it's a whole lot of information on there. And so that's Estimator for SketchUp.com. So let's jump into SketchUp. This is the sample model that you can download. And this is the overall view here. I'm kind of move out with a 3D mouse here, and you can see there's quite a bit of information in there. All these components I just brought off of the 3D warehouse. A lot of them I had in my own collection, but the bushes and trees and things, which I normally do inside of something like Lumion or Enscape for my renderings, these all looked pretty good. And so I break it down, as I do with all my jobs, I break it down into scenes, SketchUp scenes, which flow through the phases of construction. So for example, excavation, I've got some self-fencing, construction fencing. Excavation for footings. I have my footings. I have the concrete. I have reinforcing bar. Everything is in there. A foundation wall, anchor bolts, and so forth. And gravel that I put into the sub slab in there. The actual concrete slab. Sill sealer, which just goes underneath the framed walls. I have my walls themselves. There's a floor system in this little loft area. I chose a little small cabin type house just to get the point across without getting too complicated. We have subfloor, goes down on top of the floor system. Additional loft walls. I have roof framing. So we have all the rafters that go in this building. Roof sheathing. All the openings are in there, windows and doors, so forth. I get into how I do the exterior trim. Now you can mass model this. A lot of people don't go to this kind of detail in building a model. I try to model everything that I'm going to be building and purchasing. So that's why we have the level of detail you see here. These are backing panels. And then we have the trim that goes over top of it. And all this trim is accounted for using Estimator. And I can show you how that works. Stone veneer that we put on outside. There's insulation. Insulation you can see in the ceiling. This is a foam insulation, and all I did was just created a plane inside of SketchUp and textured it to look like foam. And then that foam material is how I'm getting my takeoffs, and I'll show you the materials when we get into that. I have drywall on my walls. I have my drywall ceilings. Going inside to the interior, I've got prepping the shower. I've got tile in the bathroom. The floor coverings. And again, those can all be easily estimated using Estimator and get your quantity takeoffs. Interior trim. Now I use a plugin called Profile Builder to do my trim. You don't have to do that, but it works really well with Estimator. So if you model individual pieces of trim, you can use, calculate the lineal footage of that and convert it into whatever product you're trying to purchase. Carpet, again, report the carpet in square meters or however you do it. I do square yards. Then we got some bed, bathrooms, kitchen area, some furniture. Then I have the existing site, fill dirt that we bring in. This is very thorough, and I know it's probably boring to some people that don't use a lot of this detail, but it goes all the way through all the exterior finishes, the driveway, grass and mulch, and outdoor kitchen area. So you get the idea that it's a fully loaded model. So feel free to download it and watch the videos. So we'll start with something a lot more simple. Let's choose a very basic concepts here with Estimator. So first of all, this is the tool strip for Estimator. This will open Estimator itself. This is a length tool. So this is how you could accumulate lengths of things. You can go into feet or meters, however you want to do it, whichever your system is. And I'll show you that, how that works. There's an area tool. So you can collect areas if you want to use that in reporting quantities. And we have a volume tool, and this is basically a slab tool, creates slabs of any sort. And I'll show you how that works. So how Estimator works, this is Estimator itself. And there's a help section that'll take you to the support on the website for questions. This is to sync your items with the database, which we'll be talking about. And this is your settings. So this is where you can change your currency formatting to whatever your format is, or your symbol that you use for your currency. And if there's a different thousands separator and decimal separator, you can change those. You can fill out your company information. This is sort of branding this for your business. You can put your company information, your address, all your information in here. You can actually put your own logo in there so that when you're printing your reports, it's branded and looks real nice with your information on there. SketchUp. And the individual project tab here at the top, this is where you put the information about the current job that you're working on. So we could call this SketchUp demo. So you can put your job information in there, and that's stored with the SketchUp file. You can come and put your cost codes database and items database, which confuses a lot of people. So I'll kind of get into how and why we have that in there. You don't have to use these, but this is basically a way of sorting everything in your report. So then you can also finally print out a report, view it on a nice HTML report that you can print, or you could export it as a CSV file if you wanted to go into Excel, or a spreadsheet. But the whole idea behind Estimator is I wanted it to be 100% inside of SketchUp. Absolutely no need to have a spreadsheet software, because you can actually put everything in the entire model. For things that you don't model, that's where this quote tab comes in. So for quotes, maybe something like insurance, or labor of some sort, or a dumpster for debris, any number of those sorts of things that you can put in as a quote. Maybe you're not modeling, you're not going to add a price to all your plumbing fixtures. You might just have a quote for plumbing fixtures from your vendor. So you can put as many quotes as you want in here. Now SketchUp, or Estimator for SketchUp, works on the current SketchUp selection. So you can see nothing is selected in here yet, and which is why the components, layers, and materials tabs are not available, because nothing is selected. So the way that works, and we'll talk about, there's 3 different ways essentially of getting takeoffs, and not one of them is exactly the right way. So your most basic form, you have components, all right? And a component can be anything from a chair to a window to whatever that component is, something that you're going to use inside of SketchUp a number of times. And if you don't know, if you're not a seasoned SketchUp user, it's very important. There's groups and components in SketchUp, and it's really important to know the difference between those. So I always recommend that when you create any piece of geometry, is to immediately triple click on it and then group it, or texture it and then group it, or make it a component. And if you, for instance, this little box that we're looking at in here, and I've named it something simple, just like box. If you were to copy that about, you could report however many that you have in your model. If it's a component, if you make a change to the box, it's going to make a change to all those box components. If it was a group and you copied it about, you'd be making individual changes. So it's important to know the difference between groups and components. All right, so in its basic, simplest form, without anything to do with cost codes and items databases, you could say, okay, this box is, I'm going to go right to the description. In my components tab, here's the box, and I can go into the description. I'm going to start typing in box. Now, what you'll notice is that it's trying to help me out with things that are in my items database, which I'll be showing you. So it's pulling up automatically anything that has the word box in it. But for now, I'm just going to bypass that and keep it just plain old box, okay, as if we don't use our cost codes and so forth. And then from there, I can use the attributes. I could use its volume, its area, but in this case, it's a simple component. So the attribute is just quantity, and the multiplier is just ×1. So the multiplier is how you simply convert convert one unit of measure to another unit of measure. So in this case, it's quantity and times 1. It's very simple. That's the default. Let's say we put it in at $100, and the units, I'm going to say each. I got some shortcuts in there. I have sales tax in Virginia. In the US, it's 5 point, and it's reporting out the total dollar amount. So that's in the most simple form of using Estimator, because some people don't get into the complexities of it. They just want to add pricing to the various things in their model and report it out. So at any time, I could come over to this projects tab and run this HTML report. And you can see I've got my logo in there, the project information, if I had that in there. I've got, I don't have a cost code in there. I don't have a category, but I've got a simple description of the box. There's $100 each, quantity of 7, and the total. So that's the simplistic form of how that works. So let's take a look a little bit deeper into a little nicer component. So in this case, we have a vanity component for a bathroom, and you can see it's one component, but it has components nested inside of it. So for example, if I was to click on this or double click on this component, just to drill into it, you see I've got a vanity, I've got a towel bar, I've got a sink, I have a faucet, and I have a mirror. And all of those are individual components that are nested inside this one component that's called a vanity set. And then if I go open up Estimator again, this time you'll notice there's a drop down, and you have all the different groups or components that are inside of that. So even those towels and all those things, I downloaded this off the warehouse, so I don't know exactly where some of this came from. But if I go into, say, this bath faucet, you can see it's got my cost code, my description of the product, and how much it costs. If I was to go into the vessel sink, you see I have no information in there. So I could come in and just start typing in sink. And here's this vanity sink that is from my items database. And it automatically fills out all that information. I've got the 30-inch towel bar. And again, there's nothing in there. So if I started typing in towel bar, there it is in my items database. So again, you don't have to use the item database, but it's really the best workflow. And you can make it to fit your own business. They're completely customizable. So you can see here that we're building our total of products in there, so that anytime I run a report, on this HTML report, you can see I've got all my various products. Now see, the importance about the cost codes are how it reports in when you're running a report. It's how it sorts it. It's the hierarchy of it. So if you don't use a cost code, it's going to sort it by the item code. If you don't use an item code, then it's going to sort it alphanumerically. So it just is a way of breaking up your report, or making your report read easier and sort it the way you'd like to see it sorted. So we'll take a second now. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the cost codes file. Now this file comes with Estimator, but you don't have to use it. This is a cost codes for the National Association of Home Builders in the United States. So you would have totally different cost codes, but essentially they're accounting codes. So for example, I have code 1000 is permits and fees. Code 1200 is site work. And then inside these, you have, this is a one-tiered system where it's, or two tiers. You've got the division description, you have a major code and a major description. You can keep going up to 4 tiers in this, and a lot of big companies, big estimators do that. I don't take it into that level of detail, but you can see how it's subcategorizing these items to further break it down. So you could wipe this thing out completely with your own code. You may just have code 1 furniture, code 2 paint, or whatever your business is. It's completely customizable. You just need to keep it in this same format. So you could literally take this and delete it and add your own. And really, it's just these 2 columns right here that are the main focus. So you don't have to go into the major and minor and subminors. You could just use these 2 columns. So to try to demystify this, because it looks confusing to people sometimes, so I'm just trying to explain it in its simplest form. So that's the cost codes file. Then we have the items database. And this is another one that it comes with Estimator, but you can completely make it your own. And so I've got thousands of products in this items database that I can choose from. And so you can enter items, change pricing. In here, you can put your vendor where you're buying it from. This is the one from the sample house. So I don't have any vendors in here. It's just an example. And you could choose item type if you wanted to get to that level of complexity. Most people don't. I don't take it into this, but high-level estimators need to break out between material, labor, equipment, sub, and other are the most common. So we provided that ability to further sort your estimate. The cost rate is simply how much these things cost. The attribute is the SketchUp attribute. So you can choose from quantity. You've got down here, you got millimeters, centimeters, meters, meters squared, cubed, in the course imperial. So you choose the attribute from SketchUp that you're using to generate your takeoff. And then you would put a multiplier in there if you need it. If it's just if you're reporting something like a quantity of 1, it's just times 1. But for example, here's an example of underneath my slabs, I put plastic that goes underneath the slab, and it's in rolls. And those are 16, for me, it's a 16 feet by 100 foot roll, which is 1,600 square feet. So it takes the attribute of square feet, divides it by 1,600. It's very simple math. It's no complicated math. And it reports it on how much it is per roll. And I have sales tax. So all this information can be updated inside this one file so that you're not having to constantly go back to the item in SketchUp and Estimator and change it. So for an example, like the vanity sink that we were just looking at, $85, let's say that we're going to change that to $100. So if we do that and we save it, when we go back into SketchUp and we go into Estimator, we can sync our items with the database. And you can see here, it says the following items had a different value when they've been updated. So the point of it, you don't want it to automatically sync to your database, because you may have a job that you've already estimated and you already have a contract. You don't want to change the prices. You can't change the prices, but you want your items database to be your global database that you use for your business. So you can make that database as simple as you want. You don't have to use it, but it's really a powerful tool, and you could choose different ones. You may have a items database for remodeling. You may have one for construction, new homes. You could have different ones that suit your business. So that's why it's completely customizable. So if we went back to the components and I went to that vessel sink, you can see now it's $100 where it was $85. So you can change it in here. Let's say I came in here, I said, actually the client picked out a really fancy one and it's $200. And then you see here that you're getting an error message or a message that says you're about to change it from the database. Do you want to continue? So what happens is that now breaks that link, okay? So if I click OK, it's going to change it for me, but it's not going to be changed in the database. And the reason that is that you may have a generic number for something like that sink that you use just to develop estimates for your projects. But then when your client picks out something different, you don't want to change your basic database when you can just change it in here. And then when you go to update your pricing, let's say you get a new materials price list from a vendor and you update your pricing and you want to sync your database, you don't want to override this amount. So that's why it breaks that link. All right, so that's components. So components can be any number of things. And you can actually use the attributes. Like take a look at this slab, for example. This slab is a component. You see the name of it over here in the definition, and it shows up in the components tab. So I could, if I wanted to, come in and say, description, start typing in concrete and structural slabs. Here's my concrete, and it fills it in, and it changes it to the cubic yards and reports it out in my volume. And that's great. That's one way of pricing it. But the reality is layers is a better approach. So with layers, and I'm just going to delete that information, I've got this slab on a layer that is called basement slab. All right, and that layer is in my template file that I use, and I'll show you how that's important here in a minute. So let's say we take that slab and we go to the Layers tab, and now I'll delete information that's in there. Let's say we go into the layer, and we'll say concrete, and here's my structural slabs, and it reports out the price for that. Now, if I was to change that, it would automatically update the price. And the difference is with a component, if that was a component in the next model that I'm doing, in the next job, it's going to be a different size slab. So it makes more sense to do it using layers. So the additional costs as you like. For example, yes, I can report how much concrete I need to order. But let's say I want to add my labor. I could come in and hit the plus button right here, and I could start typing in finish labor, because that's how much, let's see, slab, concrete labor, house slab. That's in my items database. So now I've just added 144 square feet, or at $1 per square foot is the unit rate, $144. So now we're up to $407 for this slab. I could also add the poly, which is the plastic that I put underneath there, and I need 1 roll of poly. And you can keep adding this as much as you want. I've got a termite treatment that I have to do in my market that will protect the house from termites, and it puts that in there. So you can see how you can add as many costs as you want, and then you can run a report, and here it is broken out by category. Okay, for some reason the termite protection didn't look right. Let's go back to that, and let's delete that one. Maybe I got it in the wrong place. There we go. Now it's in per square feet. So we run a report, and here's everything to do with that slab. Like this, and that you use over and over again, and immediately have your quantities work. Because this is the volume tool. You don't have to use this, but it comes with Estimator, and you can create various slabs. Whether it's a concrete slab, it could be drywall ceiling, it could be hardwood flooring on the floors, any flat slab, if you will, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to put it on the same layer that we had, this FOO basement slab, and then you can trace the slab. And then I'm just going to start just arbitrarily drawing some lines. You'll see it goes into sort of like a ghost slab or 3D. And so I'll go along and then kind of come to the end and then close it. And you see how it instantly creates a slab, and I instantly have my pricing associated with it. I didn't do anything else. I could actually do the same thing by coming in and making it this way. And let's say I triple click on it. I'm going to make the same texture as this concrete. Hit G as a group for my shortcut on my keyboard. And when I change that to the layer that is basement slab, you'll see now I've got instantly have my pricing. I can run a report on that, and everything is included. So the idea is that you build a template file that will allow you to model it and instantly get real-time estimating data without doing anything additional. So I'll delete these just to clean them up. So we talked about the Components tab and the Layers tab. The next one is Materials. So with Materials, it's allowing you to use whatever texture that you've used and then assign data. Think of Materials as simply an area tool. If you look at this roof is a group, and you can see in SketchUp it creates this bounding box around any piece of geometry that you choose. You have the blue bounding box around it. All right. Now the problem with trying to get the area of this is that SketchUp, if we told it to do the area, it's going to be the length and the width of the bounding box. That doesn't do us any good for these sloping sections that we have here. So the way I use that is I go by material, And so if I go to the materials tab and here's this asphalt shingle that I use, I could come in from there and type in shingles, and my shingles should come up, or roofing. Let's type in roofing. So don't have it in this database for some reason, so we'll just make it up. We'll just call it shingles, and we'll use the attribute of square feet. Now I know you guys use metric, but this is all I know. I'm not smart enough to know metric right now. Divided by 100 is how many squares of shingles, SQ, that we would order. And let's say that it's $120 per square. It's taking the square feet divided by 100 because we order in squares, which is 100 square feet. And then you can report it out. So this is a way of using materials to do that. Same thing for the brick. Now you could choose the materials tab there and choose this brick antique and come in and say brick and use the square feet, and so times 6, and because there's 6 brick in a square feet per square foot, that's 5,000 brick, and let's say that they are 30 cents each. And we put a waste factor in there. We want to round this up because we don't want to order it down so tightly. We're going to have waste. We're going to have broken pieces and bits. And I'm going to put, say, 10% waste in there. And see, now it's up to 5,697 brick. So you're able to use the materials tab very quickly. So anytime you assign that material to something, but what you have to be careful about is not to assign it to texture, to the surfaces that you don't want. Like you wouldn't want to just triple click on this and select brick. It would paint the bottom too, and that would be calculating that, and you don't want that. So you just have to be careful to make sure that you're only choosing what you want to calculate. So I'll take the roof off of this for a second, and we'll look inside, and we've got a wood flooring in there. So I go to materials. You can see I've got this wood floor. I could report how many pieces of wood flooring it is, or how much per square foot or square meters, or however you want to convert it. And that's a simple way of using materials. But you could also use the slab tool to trace that out and texture it with the texture that you want, but you do price it by layer. And that way, if you change the texture, let's say they wanted to go with a different wood, you wouldn't have to redo anything. It would be on a layer called flooring. So I hope that makes sense. There's really no one way, one right way of doing this. Paint on the walls. I textured these colored walls here, so you could use whatever this color is, this CO2 color, and add it in as paint. I don't know if I have paint in my items database. I have painting interior, and it's going to base it on square feet. So yeah, so you could assign that to a texture, if you will. You can assign it to figure out how much you need, how many gallons of paint you need, and that sort of thing. So when we get to items like trim, for example, I modeled this baseboard using Profile Builder by Dale Martin's up here. It's a wonderful plugin. If you don't have it, it's well worth it. I don't know how much it is now, maybe $60 US. But you can extrude any profile that you want, whether it's baseboard or crown molding or any kind of trim. And I use it routinely. But you don't have to do that with Estimator. It does work with Estimator. So if I was to click on this baseboard and go to layers, and then I could type in base, see if I've got baseboard in there, baseboard 1x6. You see how quickly I've got that being reported. Now, again, you don't have to use that, but I use Profile Builder to do it. But let's say that you have a model and you didn't do it. You just used push-pull and you mass modeled it to look like baseboards. So let's say that that's how that was done. There's a tool that we have for length accumulation. This is takeoff length. So in this case, you've got collections. You can make up whatever you want. This is a completely editable file. So if I went to edit the collections, you'll see it opens up a little simple note file that I can come in, and you could wipe this out completely that comes with it and put your own things in. But for example, we've got, where's our trim? Interior trim, and we have baseboard. Let's say that I wanted to put in a new type of baseboard, and I'll say tall. You have to do an underscore. You can't have a space. 1x6, and then you save it, close it, then you simply refresh your collections. When I go into here now, you can see here's my new one, tall baseboard 1x6. So I can select that. Now you've got multiple ways that you can, two different ways that you can accumulate these links of things. You can either draw it by tracing it or simply pick edges. So if I choose the picking, see if I hover over an item or hover over an edge, it's magenta, and I click on it and it turns orange, and that's collecting it. That's 19 feet right there. I can come over and do it, keep going there, and we're up to 38 feet. And we're up to 76 feet, okay? So now when I select that and I go over to my layers, you'll notice over in your layers panel in SketchUp, it's created this new layer called Takeoff Length. It's named after what we called it over here, Takeoff Length Trim Interior Tall Baseboard 1x6. So this is how you know it's naming it, so that you know how to assign it to whatever product you have in your database or whatever product you want to assign it to without a database. So in this case, I could use that same result of going in and saying baseboard 1x6. And in this case, it's 16-foot material. So it's taking the lineal feet of the unit of length divided by 16, because it's 16 units of that. And there's 5 pieces of baseboard. It rounds up to the nearest piece, right? Because we can't buy a half a board. So that's how the length function works. Very similarly, we have the area tool, and let's say that we didn't want to. You don't have to use the shingles. Let's put the shingles back on. You could have said, instead of using this material, you could quite simply come in and choose from the same kind of collections that we have. Let's just call this shingles 2, for example. You could set the material. So this is one that you could set it to the shingle material if you wanted to, or you could simply use a color. So when you set the material, it's just pulling it from your available materials in your materials panel. But let's just use what we have in this red material that we have. And you can either trace an area to get the area, or simply do the picking. So in this case, I hover over it, and I've got the magenta. It turns to orange when I click on it. I go to the next one, and you can see here I've got 584 square feet. You can change those units to meters, square meters if you like, or millimeters, whichever you're using. And so that's another way of getting the takeoff. So there's no one right way of doing it. So that's kind of the overview of Estimator. I'll show you one thing. I know that Paulina mentioned some timber framing elements, so I'll show you that. This is Framer for SketchUp. And so this is the toolbar that you see here. And you can make whatever section materials you want. There's metric and imperial. So you can, whatever size of the stud that you're using, what section. In my case, I'm going to use a 2x6. How many bottom plates? I'm going on this concrete here, so I'm going to use a pressure treated bottom plate, double top plate. The start and end conditions here, I'll show you how that looks. I'm using this California corner that is sort of a T intersection that will allow for the next wall to nail to it. I'm going to put OSB on the exterior. You could put plywood, you could put drywall, dense glass, zip panels, anything you want to make up. If you use a product in your country there, you can name it what you want to name it and apply the thickness that you want. So I'm going to use a 1/2 inch. And the offsets I'll show you in a second. Then the wallboard on the inside, we could put drywall in there. I'm just leaving it off so you can see the framing for now. Spacing is 16 inches on center. Whatever it is in your market, you can change that to that. I'm going to go with this 9-foot wall. We could do a rectangular wall, we could do a shed wall, or we could do a gable wall. So the rectangle is just the straight across wall that we're going to be using right now. So we can come in and say, okay, and then I'm just going to literally trace right on top of the slab from one end to the other. And you say, I instantly have a wall. It's got the sheathing on it. I've got my studs. I've got these corners that are accepting the next wall. So that's that California corner. So you can get insulation back inside there. It's just a term here used in the States for efficiency. you can add openings. So let's say we go in, I'm going to close Estimator for a second. Well, actually, I'll keep it open. You can see how I modeled that wall, and I instantly have all of my products that are associated with that wall. So here's my studs, my treated plates, and my sheathing instantly done for me. So let's put in an opening. I'm going to close Estimator for a second. Let's put in a door. You can choose what type of header and how many plies. So I've got a double, in this case, 2x10. I want to put a plate on the top and the bottom of that header. And let's just say I have one jack, which is supporting the header. And I wish I knew the terms in your language for these members, but it's all this is in mine. You could put the rough width and height of that opening and simply click OK, and you'll be able to choose where you want that. So if you're drawing over top of a set of plans, you might be able to infer the center point or center dimension line. If you hit Tab, it'll go to one side or the other, but it defaults to the center. So let's just put it right there. Now you could do another one if you wanted to. Otherwise, just hit Enter, and that cuts it off. And you can see I've got my header in there. And if I went into Estimator again, and now run that report, you'll see that I have the header material, this 2x10 material that's in there. So you're getting this all real time, which is really nice. So let's go and continue. In this case, I'm going to frame another wall, and I'm going to start out with one stud this time because it's at the end. So one stud. I'm going to end with the California on the left. And again, I won't get into particulars on that. The starting offset, we got to overlap this first wall. So I'm going to come out 6 inches to cap this wall. So I can model it from here to here. And you'll see how it extended the plywood over to the side. So that's Framer, Framer for SketchUp. And again, you can change all the parameters up in the toolbar here. This is where you can configure your materials. You've got metric sections and imperial sections, and this is where you can add as many as you want in here for all your different systems. So I'll let you look at that if you're interested in playing around with Framer. All right, and then the last plugin is PDF Importer, and this is a lot of fun here because I do this basically every day. I work for other builders. That's what this constructability is. Builders send me their plans in PDF form, and then I import them into SketchUp, and I build their houses before they are, and I'm able to point out problems and issues, structural problems, things like that that nobody catches looking at boring 2D drawings, right? So the way that works is you go to extensions, it'll show up here. If you have it in there, it'll show up under your extensions and import PDF file. It's going to come up and ask you where you want to choose it from, and I'm just going to choose a file. Let's choose this main floor from this sample house and click OK, and you'll see that it takes a second, but then it's going to just emerge in here or come into SketchUp into the view. While that's going, I'll take a drink of water from my SketchUp mug from Basecamp. Anybody go to 3D Basecamp last year? I think they have them over in your neck of the woods as well. Doesn't usually take this long, only because I'm giving a demonstration, of course. There we go. All right, so now we brought it in. I'll move it off to the side. So when it comes in, it doesn't know what scale it is, right? So that's why it's nice to be able to read these dimensions. So all I have to do, it comes in as a group. I'm going to select the group, double click on it, and then I'm going to come down and use my tape measure tool. I'm going to hit Control so it doesn't actually leave a guide. This is the auto save that you see spinning. Okay, I'm going to click on this side over here, and I know this is 24 feet. So if I click on that and type in 24 feet and enter, that didn't work that time. It's because I left a guideline. Let's try that again. "24 feet. Do you want to resize the active group?" Yes. So now when I do that, it's scaled properly. And when I double check the dimensions, this is 7 feet and that's 7 feet. And then I can start modeling right on top of it. So that's PDF Importer and Framer. And the last one is Issue Tracker. I'll do that real quickly. I know we're running out of time here. This is Issue Tracker. And let's say that I wanted to change the door size here, but I'm with a client. They want to make this a taller door. So I could come in and tell what level it is, where's the location, and this is a customizable list. You can change this. I'm just going to put main level right now, and the category is structural, and I could put in change door to 8 feet, whatever it is that they want to do. This way you can mark this up quickly, but what you can do at any time at this point is you can go up to issue tracker and view report, and it's going to open up a nice branded report, your company information, your logo, where's the job location, and it's got a 3D image or a snapshot of what the image actually is, or the issue actually is. So I hear Paulina typing. The question is it possible to create your own layout of the report? So there are some customized report abilities that we have now in this version. So for example, if I go to the project tab and I say HTML report here, you can see it's printing out cost code, my description. I don't have vendors in there. So what if I didn't want to even report the vendor? Or let's say I didn't want to show the pricing. You can change all those items right here. These are the columns to show in your report. So let's say I cut off the vendor, for example, and I don't want to show the notes. And then I run that report. You see it simplified the report here. And further, you can customize it by reordering these columns. So if I click on reorder columns, you can see I can move these around. And that reflects or changes the way I'm reporting it. So those are the customized abilities to change the layout of the report. Any other questions, or did that answer it? Yeah, the discount, I set it to the end of the month. So that's almost a month long. I can extend it. I'm not greedy. I just want people to be able to be faster in their workflow and enjoy it. So, and feel free to reach out to me through the contact page or John@Estimator for SketchUp.com. I got several of them, email addresses that is. So feel free to reach out with any questions on any of this. I always answer my emails.